What if I told you that Google, the giant that shapes how you search, shop, and even think, was nearly wiped off the map before it even had a chance to crawl? Imagine a world where Googling never became a verb, where the internet was ruled by outdated search engines that buried the truth under pages of chaos. No Gmail, no Google Maps, no YouTube, just a messy digital Wild West, where finding a simple recipe or the latest news felt like digging through a dusty library with the lights off. It is hard to believe, but in its very first year, Google stood on the edge of total collapse. This was not the polished empire we know today. It was two exhausted graduate students crammed inside a garage, surrounded by humming servers that overheated daily with barely enough money to buy more hard drives. Larry Page and Sergey Brin had a dream so radical that almost everyone laughed in their faces. That search could be smarter, faster, and fairer than anything the internet had ever seen. But here is the shocking twist. No one wanted it. Investors ignored them. Tech giants brushed them aside. At one point, the founders were so desperate that they tried to sell Google for just $1 million. Yes, $1 million, the price of a nice house in Silicon Valley. And even then, no one said yes. So how did a company that nobody wanted turn into the backbone of modern life, valued at over $2 trillion today? To answer that, we need to go back to the fragile beginning, where every single day felt like it could be Google's last. This is the untold story of how the world's most powerful tech empire almost disappeared before it began. The 1990s Internet Wild West. The late 1990s Internet was nothing like the sleek, organized network we know today. It was chaotic, noisy, and dominated by giants who thought they had already won the game. Yahoo, AltaVista, Lycos, these were the names everyone trusted. Their portals looked like cluttered billboards, filled with flashing ads, weather widgets, horoscopes, and endless blue links that often led you in circles. Searching for information was less about finding answers and more about getting lost in a maze. Into this chaos stepped two young PhD students from Stanford, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Their idea sounded almost laughable, a search engine that actually worked, one that ranked websites not by how many keywords they stuffed onto a page, but by how many other sites trusted them enough to link back. They called it bankrupt at first, a strange name that hinted at analyzing the backlinks of the web. Eventually, they renamed it something catchier, Google, a nod to the mathematical term Google, the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. But here was the problem. No one in Silicon Valley believed a search engine could make money. Portals were the future, they said. The money was in keeping people trapped on a homepage filled with banner ads, not in sending them away to another site as quickly as possible. Larry and Sergey were going against the grain, insisting that speed and accuracy mattered more than flashy distractions. Still, in a tiny garage in Menlo Park, California, they coded furiously, stacking cheap servers built from spare computer parts, praying each night that their creation would not crash. The web was growing fast, and so was the load on their fragile system. To their surprise, word of mouth spread quickly among students and academics. There's this new search engine. It actually finds what you need. Google began to attract loyal users, but with every new search came a dangerous truth. More traffic meant more costs. It was a thrilling beginning, but it was also a ticking time bomb. The first financial crisis. Success, even in its smallest form, came with a cruel price tag. Every time someone typed a search into Google, it was not just data, it was money leaving Larry and Sergey's pockets. Their system required enormous processing power, and in the late 1990s, server space was painfully expensive. Each new user meant buying another hard drive, another processor, another fan to keep the overheating machines alive. Google was growing, yes, but it was bleeding cash faster than it could breathe. Larry and Sergey were still students. They did not have corporate accounts or billionaire backers. Instead, they scavenged. They begged friends to lend old computers, stacked motherboards like Lego bricks, and turned a garage into what looked less like an office and more like a junkyard of wires, blinking lights, and noisy fans. To outsiders, it looked ridiculous. To insiders, it was desperate survival. But the math was merciless. By 1998, Google was processing tens of thousands of searches per day. That meant electricity bills soaring, servers breaking down, and two young founders who were running out of credit cards to swipe. The company had no revenue model, no way to pay for its rapid growth. Google, the search engine that was quietly outshining Yahoo and Alta Vista in performance, was itself one step away from collapse. The tension grew unbearable. They had the technology, the users, even the academic praise, but none of it translated into cash. Each night, as they stared at the humming servers, one thought haunted them. How long before the lights go out for good? And then came the harsh reality. Without immediate funding, Google had maybe a few weeks left to live. When the money was nearly gone, Larry and Sergey did what every desperate startup founder must do. They went looking for investors. They knocked on doors all across Silicon Valley, pitching their revolutionary idea, a search engine that actually worked, that could organize the chaos of the web. They showed off their prototype, explained their PageRank algorithm, and promised a future where information could be found in seconds instead of hours. And yet, the response was brutal. Venture capitalists leaned back in their leather chairs, shook their heads, and dismissed the idea. Search engines don't make money, they said. Portals are the future. Yahoo, AOL, Lycos, that's where the real business is. One meeting after another ended in rejection. Some investors even laughed, suggesting that Larry and Sergey were too naive, that their little garage project would collapse within months. The humiliation was stinging. The two young founders had built something extraordinary, but no one seemed to care. In sheer desperation, Larry and Sergey tried to sell their technology outright. They approached Excite, one of the big players at the time, offering to sell Google for just $1 million. $1 million for the entire company. Excite turned them down. They even lowered the asking price to $750,000, and still, the answer was no. Think about that. The company that today is worth more than $2 trillion, the engine behind Gmail, YouTube, and Android, could have been bought for less than the cost of a luxury house in California. But nobody wanted it. The rejections piled up, and the message was clear. Silicon Valley did not believe in Google. Larry and Sergey were running out of options, and with their funds almost dry, they were staring at the possibility that Google would vanish before the world even noticed it had existed. By now, Google was more an obsession than a company. Every hour was spent fixing servers, tweaking algorithms, and begging for money that never came. The stress was unbearable, and it began to crack the bond between Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Sergey, ever the pragmatist, started to wonder if selling was the only way out. After all, what was the point of holding on to a dream that was draining them dry? He saw their bank accounts shrinking, their credit lines nearly maxed out, and their personal lives evaporating into endless nights surrounded by whirring machines. Larry, on the other hand, was stubborn to the core. He refused to let go. To him, Google was not just a project, it was a mission. He believed with a near religious conviction that their algorithm would change the world, that giving up now would be like burning down the Library of Alexandria before anyone read the books inside. The arguments grew heated. Should they sell for whatever scraps they could get, just to escape the nightmare, or should they double down, risking total collapse? Each discussion ended the same way: frustration, silence, and another long night of doubt. Meanwhile, the servers kept failing. At times, the system buckled under the weight of searches, crashing in the middle of the night. Loyal users began to complain. If they could not keep the service running, even those early adopters would abandon them for the safe giants like Yahoo. Inside that cramped garage, the future of Google balanced on a knife's edge. Two young men, barely in their 20s, were being crushed between the brilliance of their invention and the brutal economics of the real world. For the first time, the possibility of dissolution, the end of Google before it truly began, felt terrifyingly real. Just when it seemed the dream was about to collapse, fate delivered an unlikely savior. Larry and Sergey managed to secure a short meeting with Andy Bechtolsheim, the legendary co-founder of Sun Microsystems. The meeting took place not in some glossy boardroom, but right on the porch of a Silicon Valley home in the early morning light. They hurriedly showed Andy a demo of their search engine, explaining the algorithm, the speed, the clarity of results. Andy did not need a long pitch. Within minutes, he saw the potential. "This is the future of search," he said bluntly. And then, in a moment that would alter the history of technology, he pulled out his checkbook and wrote a check for $100,000, made out to a company called Google Inc. There was just one problem. Google Inc. did not exist yet. Larry and Sergey had not even set up a corporate bank account. They were holding a six-figure lifeline they could not cash until they formally created a company. For days, the check sat there, a symbol of both salvation and absurdity. But when the paperwork was complete, that money bought them something far more valuable than servers and electricity. It bought them time to keep building, to survive the next month, and to keep the dream alive. The investment from Bechtelsheim did not solve all of Google's problems. It was a band-aid on a bullet wound, but it was enough to push them forward. For the first time, they felt that someone powerful believed in them, and that belief lit a fire under Larry and Sergey. If one man could see the future in their project, maybe others eventually would too. Yet, even as the servers roared back to life, another storm was brewing. Google still had no way to make money. The technology was brilliant, but brilliance alone could not pay the bills. The turning point: keyword advertising. With Andy Bechtelsheim's check in the bank, Google had breathing room, but money alone was not enough. The clock was still ticking. Users loved Google's clean interface and lightning-fast results, but love did not pay for servers, salaries, or electricity. The cruel truth remained: Google had no business model. It was a brilliant search engine with no way to survive. Larry and Sergey refused to follow the crowd. Yahoo and AOL were plastering their homepages with banner ads, flashing, colorful distractions that cluttered the screen. Google's founders believed this was poison. They wanted simplicity, purity, a search bar, white space, and nothing else. But purity came at a cost: zero revenue. The breakthrough came in the form of a radical idea: ads tied directly to what people were searching for. Instead of annoying banners that had nothing to do with a user's query, why not place small, text-based ads that matched the exact keywords typed into the search box? Someone looking for running shoes would see ads for sneakers. Someone searching cheap flights would see travel offers. It was advertising that felt less like an interruption and more like a service. When Larry and Sergey floated this concept, many critics recoiled. Ads would corrupt the integrity of search, they warned. It would turn Google into just another money-hungry portal. But the founders pushed forward cautiously, designing the system with one golden rule: ads must be relevant, and they must never overshadow the results themselves. The product was called AdWords, and when it launched in 2000, the impact was immediate. For the first time, Google was not just loved, it was profitable. The tiny text ads, easy to ignore but perfectly targeted, became a goldmine. What looked like a small experiment quickly revealed itself to be a financial engine capable of printing money. The lifeline had become a turning point. Google had discovered the business model that would not only save it from extinction, but propel it into the stratosphere. And yet, danger still lurked. Just as Google was finding its footing, a powerful rival came knocking, with an offer that could have changed everything. By the early 2000s, Google was no longer just a garage experiment. With AdWords beginning to generate real revenue, it was finally proving itself as more than an academic toy. But success brought new attention, and one of the most powerful tech players of the era came knocking: Yahoo. At the time, Yahoo was the undisputed giant of the internet. Its purple logo was everywhere, its portal was the homepage for millions, and its executives believed they controlled the future of the web. In their eyes, Google was an upstart, brilliant but vulnerable. And so, in 2002, Yahoo made a bold move. They offered to buy Google for $3 billion. $3 billion. For Larry and Sergey, who only a few years earlier had struggled to cash a $100,000 check, it was a staggering sum. Advisors urged them to take it. Friends warned that turning it down would be madness. After all, Yahoo was a powerhouse, and Google was still just a search company with no other products. Why risk everything? But Larry and Sergey did not flinch. They believed Google's mission was bigger than money. They had not built this engine just to hand it over. They wanted to organize the world's information, not become a small cog in someone else's machine. Against all logic, they refused the offer. It was a gamble that looked reckless at the time. Yahoo executives walked away thinking Google had overplayed its hand. yet history would prove otherwise. Within a few years, Yahoo began to stumble, weighed down by bad decisions and missed opportunities. Meanwhile, Google surged ahead, expanding into Gmail, Maps, and eventually YouTube. The irony is hard to miss. Yahoo had a chance to own Google and become the unstoppable empire of the internet. Instead, by underestimating two stubborn Stanford students, it sealed its own decline. For Google, the near takeover was more than just a brush with destiny. It was proof that their survival depended on betting on themselves, even when the world called them crazy. But instead, the opposite happened. Google soared. AdWords exploded in popularity. Businesses of every size, from tiny mom-and-pop shops to global corporations, flocked to the platform. For the first time, advertising on the internet actually worked. No more random banner ads begging for clicks. Now, companies could reach customers precisely when they were searching for what they offered. Google was not just solving the chaos of the web, it was solving the chaos of online business. With the flood of revenue, Google scaled its operations like never before. The once shaky servers in a Menlo Park garage gave way to sprawling data centers around the globe. Instead of begging for old computer parts, Larry and Sergey were now building some of the most advanced infrastructure the tech world had ever seen. Google was no longer surviving day to day. It was expanding at rocket speed. And the users? They stayed loyal. While Yahoo and other portals buried information under clutter, Google doubled down on simplicity. One search bar, one logo, one mission. Deliver the answer fast. That philosophy made it the darling of a generation hungry for clarity in an increasingly noisy internet. By the mid-2000s, Google had crossed a line of no return. It was no longer the underdog begging for scraps. It was the company everyone else feared. Competitors that once mocked it scrambled to copy its model. Investors who had once laughed now fought for a chance to buy its stock. The company that had teetered on the edge of death was suddenly unstoppable. But in that meteoric rise lay an important truth. Google had escaped collapse not by following the rules of the game, but by rewriting them entirely. Looking back, it is almost impossible to imagine the internet without Google. Yet the truth is chilling. This empire, now worth over $2 trillion, nearly disappeared before it ever took off. In its first fragile years, Google faced every imaginable roadblock: financial ruin, investor rejection, internal doubts, even the looming threat of being swallowed whole by a rival. And yet, it survived. Not because the path was easy, but because its founders refused to let go. Larry Page's stubborn belief that their algorithm mattered, Sergey Brin's willingness to keep building even when the odds looked hopeless, and the timely lifeline from Andy Bechtolsheim, all of these moments stitched together a story of survival that reads more like a thriller than a business plan. The lesson is not just about Google. It is about the brutal reality of startups. The difference between collapse and world-changing success can come down to a single decision, a single check, a single refusal to quit. $1 million could have erased Google from history. Instead, a gamble to hold on turned it into the backbone of modern life. For every young entrepreneur, the story of Google's near death is both terrifying and inspiring. Terrifying, because even the most brilliant ideas can starve without money. Inspiring, because sometimes refusing to give up is the most valuable currency of all. So the next time you type a query into that simple white search bar, remember, you are looking at the ghost of a company that almost never was. Google is not just a success story. It is a reminder that history's greatest revolutions often teeter on the edge of failure.